Hey, I'm Paul, and this is Roast the Post, the story behind the bullet points.
So, this is a very special episode of Roast the Post. This is an opportunity for myself and the listeners to get to know Paul a little bit better. When Paul and I started this podcast together, some of you might not realize that we barely knew each other. We barely knew each other. We met through Substack, collaborated on a couple of posts. I guested on Paul's other podcast. And everything just kind of clicked. But at the same time, I don't know much about your background. So I have some questions that I'm going to ask you, interview styles, and that'll give the opportunity for me and the audience to get to know you a little better.
I will drop my man card. I will open up and be vulnerable and actually talk about my feelings and the things that I've done. I promise you this.
Excellent. Let's get into it. So the first question I have for you, Paul, is what's your origin story? Tell us about your early career and what led you to your current career. What led you to where you are right now?
Yeah, I'm a small town boy. I grew up in rural Ontario here in Canada, near Algonquin Park, and it's funny because my friends tell me all the time that when I'm back visiting family or back visiting people there, I slip back into my rural country accent, which I learned as I was older as a form of code switching. Right, like you kind of change how you present yourself, how you talk, how you act a little bit based on your surroundings, and I'd never really realized that I was doing that. So yeah, I'm a small town boy. I went to a liberal arts college, Trent University, and studied history, which has very little to do directly with the work that I do today, but it was a pretty interesting kind of start to my educational kind of like being on my own and whatever else. And it taught me a lot of the soft skills and critical thinking that are super, super useful today when hard skills are being replaced kind of en masse by technology and by shifts in labor markets, et cetera, et cetera. One thing that AI can't really keep up with super well is critical thinking and reasoning and all the things that humans kind of do well in the moment. So I'm grateful that I had that kind of an education. After I graduated, I was, believe it or not, recruiting to join our National Intelligence Service. I was in the CSIS recruiting pool for about 18 months, and I got to the part where they sat me down in the polygraph chair and strapped me up to all the things. And I don't know what happened after that. I must have said something, and they were like, yeah, this guy's a no. So that was the end of that. And I was kind of figuring out, all right, well, what do I do now? And I stumbled across entrepreneurship. I worked for myself while I was in that 18-month period, not making any money. I worked as a freelancer, a contractor in marketing communications, doing writing, doing strategy for small brands, and doing consulting for executives on PR and perception and personal branding. So I kind of started my career there. From that, I caught the bug and I started a business with some people that I'd met while I was at university, and that didn't go so well. It kind of went sideways. But I started another business, and that went a whole lot better, and I sold that. After that, I moved to Ottawa. I worked for a marketing agency for a little bit. I started my kind of proper career as an employee out in professional services and decided that I didn't really like that too much. I moved to Toronto after that and joined a tech company and thought to myself, hey, startups are great. Like, let's do this thing for a while. It'll be fun and I'll be around people my own age and there won't be a lot of like corporate structure and legacy and all the things that bother me about the world of work. It'll just be, great. And maybe I'll get super, super rich. Did that for about a decade and left that to work with other companies, entrepreneurs, companies that were starting to grow their businesses, because I learned that that's where my passion lies. Helping organizations scale and grow and do so in a way that doesn't make them blow apart at the seams. So today, I'm a bit of a management consultant specializing in operations and supply chain and leadership structure for companies that are trying to figure out, like, how do we go from 1 to 100? We've already done the hard work of getting to 1. What do we do from there?
That's fantastic. And I guess my question for you, follow-up question, a couple of follow-up questions. What is it about the work that you're doing now that energizes you, and what about it do you find most draining?
Mm. Yeah. So the thing about being a consultant is the thing that's energizing. The thing that's really good about being a consultant is you kind of set your own schedule. You're really the one driving the show of most of your engagements when you kind of work at the level and in the way that I do. You set the terms. So I can structure my engagements around things that I want to be a part of, work. And I can kind of disincentivize things that I don't want to be a part of that work. So you have a lot more control as a consultant than you do as an employee in a lot of ways. So I find that energizing because I can just get rid of the things that drain me. And things that drain me are stupid or repetitive work things, bits of work meetings that don't actually make a difference. I don't like those. So I tend to kind of bat them away. And a lot of the work I end up doing actually tends to be how do we make structures like this, whether it's communications, whether it's company management, whether it's data review, whether it's like management of the business. How do we make that more effective and less, let's have a little talky talk. So I tend to do a lot of work on that. And I find that energizing because interestingly enough, I'm like getting rid of the de-energizing or disenergizing things that I don't like.
Yeah, I've heard this from other consultants too, that it's kind of a gift that you give yourself of, oh, I don't like, say, for example, if you're an HR consultant, I don't like recruitment. I don't have to do that. That's not a service that I offer.
Yeah.
So that can give you a bit of a relief as well. I think
Yeah.
sometimes just as with things like addictions, you replace that though with something else. So something that drained you that you're not doing anymore, something else is going to take that place. So eventually it just all.
For sure. And when you're a consultant, and especially when you're like a one person consultant, a solopreneur, invoicing sucks.
Yeah.
Chasing the money is just awful. Highly, highly, highly recommend avoiding that. Unless you're the kind of person who likes to send tons of emails all the time and be like, pay me please, pay me please, pay me please.
Yeah.
And I'm very much a carrot person. So I like to use incentives rather than penalties to kind of coax out the behaviors that I want. So I'll structure my invoices, and a lot of consulting invoices, a lot of company invoices will say something to the effect of late payment. There's an interest penalty of 5% per month calculated, whatever else. But then you just got to go chase that late payment invoicing, right? So you're like compounding the stuff that you don't like
Yeah.
to do, chasing the money, by creating the wrong incentive. So what I do instead a lot of the time is I say, okay, this is what I think my price is going to be for a certain engagement. I'm going to mark it up between 10 and 12%, whatever I think like an interest penalty should be over a course of a 90-day period. And I'm going to make that my price. But then if you pay on time, net 14, guess what? You get a discount of 10 or 12%. Same thing when it comes to the money, just a discount instead of like a stick for chasing.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other thing I hear about consulting too is that's challenging is the hustle, right? Like you got to go out there and sell your services, and that's not always comfortable. Not everyone who's good at one thing is also good at sales or, you
Yep.
know.
Developing new business is
Yeah,
probably one of the things that I am weakest at. It's just not natural to me to go out and sell myself, and it's also time consuming. If I look at what I want to be spending my time on, it's either do I want to be spending my time developing business, or do I want to be spending my time working for clients and really helping them? I want to spend as much of my time as possible working for clients, putting my energy into helping them grow their business and make something better out of what they've started.
for sure.
100%. But I got
Absolutely.
to go find clients.
Yeah. Um, and then my other question that goes into the first question that I asked is, this is what you're doing now. What if you could do anything, if you could have any career making a living off of doing something, what would it be?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's a couple of different answers to that. I think like one answer is I would make my money yapping. If somebody came along and told us like, hey, we'll give you a couple $100,000 a year to produce Roast the Post, you and Jen, I'd be like, cool. Let's just not do anything else, and I'll take that money, my half of that money, and that'll be a fun life. Is that realistic? Maybe not. Deals like that in podcasting, I don't think are every day. But the other thing that if I could start over and I was like 20, if I could start over at 20, I think what I would do would be get into something related to alternative energy because I'm super, super interested in sustainability. And I think about, it's kind of society level systems. And one of the biggest challenges that we face as a civilization, or we will face as a civilization over the next several decades, is how do we generate enough energy for a population that is growing, that requires more food, that requires more electricity, in a way that isn't going to completely destroy the planet. So there's that question about decarbonization. How do we cross the chasm? How do we decarbonize the electricity grid? I find the technologies that are being developed in that space to combat that problem really, really fascinating. So, if I was 20, I'd probably pursue some kind of STEM career, technology, engineering, manufacturing, that was kind of oriented towards that space because I'm so interested in it. But starting over and getting a new education now in my 40s and then pursuing a new sector that way, it's not super realistic. So, I've got to kind of carry on with what I'm doing, and kind of do what I can to indulge those passions in, the way that I can, professional or not. But if I was going to start over and do something different, I think I'd do that.
Very cool. So what I'm hearing is podcasting it is.
100%.
100%. Okay, so the next question I have for you is, was there a pivotal moment in your career that fundamentally changed how you think about leadership, growth, or building organizations? And what was it?
Yeah, leadership, absolutely. So there's a couple of different answers to that. Was there a pivotal point in my career that set me on a different path in thinking about leadership? Yep, absolutely. And I would say it was one of my first like grown up jobs. I worked in this agency, small, but the person who owned it and ran it was kind of an egomaniac. He did not treat people well, and he created a very toxic environment with his behaviors. And when you're in a toxic environment and the office is, 1,500 square feet or something, and there's like 10 people working in there, it sits like a fog. It was unpleasant. It was uncomfortable. And I learned a lot about leadership, simply through observing what it shouldn't be. So that was kind of one pivotal part in my career, about leadership. The other thing that was a little bit pivotal in my career, about how I think about organizations, was starting to learn more about systems thinking. When I got into technology and when I was working for the technology company, it was a smart lighting company about 10 years ago. A lot of the work that I was doing was around systems. So I studied systems theory, design thinking, and really got into that whole world, and where it intersected with product design and product experience. And it got me thinking, like, this is no different from an organization. An organization is, there's a lot of different metaphors that you can apply to it. If you take kind of like the team one, if an organization is, a football team, then you construct your football team with saying, all right, I need these players. And I think that these people have the right characteristics to be a player on the field in a certain position. How do I get that onto the field and juggle those roles in a way that makes the most sense so that we're going to win the match? Organizations are very much like constructing a team that's playing a game, even though the stakes are bigger and it's money and it's serious and it's corporate and all this other stuff. At the end of the day, it's like you want to not only have the right people in the right place, but you want to figure out how to design the place for the people and for the person that is in that specific place. If you only look at it from the one side of that, you're destined to fail because people in an organization change, right? Your needs evolve. Things are always changing. So if you don't do that well, you're kind of relegating yourself to a future where it's going to go sideways. That interests me greatly. And that's a big part of the work that we do.
Absolutely. I agree. Very passionate about systems thinking and the concept of organizations as living systems. I'm going to take a moment to plug another Substack account, actually, that if people are interested in the analogy that you just shared, which I think is a phenomenal one about like sports teams and organizations and systems thinking, there is a really great Substack account called Pattern of Play by a gentleman named Kwame. And he uses football, as in soccer, to decode how systems really work. He's got some fascinating posts, really big fan. I've been following him from the get-go of when I first joined Substack. So it's called Pattern of Play. And again, it's about sports, football, soccer, and systems thinking. Really,
Yeah,
really.
let's shut that out in the show notes too.
Yeah.
And I'm going to start following Kwame because I didn't know that that was a thing until now.
Yes, Kwame is great. Really lovely posts, especially now with as we are recording this, it's World Cup fever, and so it's all the more relevant. Um, I get it. I love how you said that the toxicity kind of sits there like a fog. It's so true. It becomes another player in the organization, like it's its own entity, and it is horrifying. So yeah, I get it. It's unfortunate that most often when we recall pivotal moments in our careers or moments that have inspired us, they're usually anchored to something negative that happened. But such is life. Um, so another question I have for you. You've worked across startups. You talked about that in the intro, operations, marketing strategy. Looking back, what's one business mistake that taught you the most? And maybe it's from your own personal foray into entrepreneurship. I think that that would be really valuable for listeners.
Yeah, I think the most valuable lesson that I've learned, and specifically from failure, in my past is perfect is the enemy of I forget how the saying goes, but it's like perfect is the enemy of execution, or perfect is the enemy of good enough, or something like
Progress.
that. Perfect is the enemy of progress. Yeah, exactly. 100%. That has happened to me. I, at various points in my career, and even to some extent now, I've been what you'd call a perfectionist. So when I was writing technical scopes, when I was writing product development plans, project plans for building technical products, for building integrations, I would focus on how do we make this better? How do we make this better? If we do this, will it be better? Better, 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 better. And that's fine until better gets to a point where it stops you from doing good enough, right? Or like you can think of it as if I try to be the best or I try to build the best of something, will it prevent me from being better than all of the competition? And once you get there, incredibly damaging because inertia is as much of a thing, a competitive advantage, as having the best quality is. So I've learned that lesson painfully a couple of times, and I would say that you have to come to this place where you can recognize that sometimes you don't push for absolutely everything you want because you recognize that it's going to be counterproductive. You're actually creating a weight or an anchor on an organization or a team if you do that, and that'll ultimately sink your ship.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because I remember long ago I was interviewed for a role, and one of the questions that they asked me was, would you rather submit something good enough and on time or late but perfect? And I think that I probably spent like 20 minutes kind of dissecting that question with them as part of my response because when you are a perfectionist, that's a really hard question to answer because part of being perfect for me also means submitting something on time, right? Like, well, if it's,
Yeah.
if it's late, then it's not perfect. And so I got into like really like the semantics and all the meaning of this, like
Yeah.
really what I felt to be a very heavy question. I got the job. I'm surprised I did because that was kind of like my focus. But it
Yeah.
is very fascinating lessons to learn when you are really like hyper fixated on perfection. It's to the detriment.
My answer to that question would be it depends.
Yeah.
Let's talk about why.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good answer to it because it depends on the scenario, it depends on the project, it depends on so many different factors. And I think that's where we went down that path of like, here is how I view it. And yeah, but it's interesting for sure. What I've noticed from you, an observation, is that you are very good at spotting problems hiding in plain sight. What's something most companies believe they're good at, but usually are not?
Whew, that's a great question.
I know.
That's a great question. All companies, and companies, we have this funny thing in Western civilization where we tend to think of or we tend to anthropomorphize companies
Mm.
like they're living beings, and there are legal structures that kind of sort of make corporations people in some certain scenarios under some conditions. They're treated with rights as people are. But we have to remember that companies, that corporations are artificial structures that we created, and they reflect the people within them. Typically, they reflect the people at the management layer, the leadership layer, who have formed the organization or who are in charge of leading it. Companies will reflect those people. Um, so each company is a little bit different. I do find, though, and this is also something that I wish more CFOs and controllers would keep in mind and take to heart, is that most companies view people as interchangeable parts in the machine. You can have layoffs. You can kind of get rid of people and then hire new people. And it's absolutely the same. It's no problem. You just go to the job market, go to the labor market with a job ad. You have a specification of what you want, and you can just plug that person into your organization, and everything's going to be like great. It'll be as good as before or better. What that viewpoint, though, universally misses is the institutional knowledge and the value of the institutional knowledge that people who are laid off, who are long tenured, had for that organization. And I kind of relate this to kind of a failure in accounting, interestingly enough. When you are doing when you're creating your balance sheet as an accountant or as like a CFO or like an auditor or whatever, whoever is creating the balance sheet as a part of your financial statements. There's a way to value your machinery, your capital assets. There's a way to value your accounts receivable. There's a way to value your accounts payable, your inventory, your stock. All of those have a monetary value, and they're on the balance sheet. A balance sheet or income statement, depending on what it is. But they're in your financial statements. What's not in your financial statements is the value of people. So there is no generally accepted way to value in financial terms the institutional knowledge of a workforce inside an organization. Because of that, leadership teams don't think that there is value to it, but there very much is. Give me an organization with engaged people who have been working there for 20 years, directly competing against a organization that is slightly larger, that has a much shorter tenured workforce. And I can tell you which one is going to outperform financially and with their customers. It's the one with the longer tenured workforce. As long as the culture is, positive, and as long as everybody is engaged and they're trying their best and they're paid well and all that stuff, that organization with institutional knowledge is going to outperform and outcompete the one that doesn't have the institutional knowledge, hands down, 99.9% of the time. So I wish that companies understood that.
This is a fascinating answer. I agree. again, long time ago, I worked for an organization that was investing in a clothing company, like sustainable, natural, locally made clothing. And when we did a site visit to the warehouse, they were talking about the people who are like some the seamstresses. I'm sorry, I don't know what the term is for this, but the people actually making the clothing, sewing the clothing and everything, and they're all kind of sitting there at their sewing machines, and they're older. The majority of them are much older. And I
Mm.
noticed that, and I was asking the CEO during the tour, like, what is your plan for transferring this knowledge to the next generation? Like, do you have training programs? Are you going to schools and trying to bring people in? Like, what are you trying to do to make sure that you have succession for this and that you're not losing this skill set? And he just kind of looked at me like, what are you talking about? And so when you talk about that being on the balance sheet, uh, it's exactly that. Like, if you lose these workers who a lot of them appear to be close to retirement age, you're done. What are you going to do? Because if your whole thing is sustainable clothing and locally made, but you don't have anyone local to be able to do that, then you're going and getting it, you're offshoring all of this stuff, and your mission and your product is no longer the same thing that it was. So it is a very interesting thing when you start to look at it. And I think you can see that, like you mentioned, across different industries, different companies. So really interesting.
And if you realize too late that that problem exists and will bite you in the butt, and you start to make like moves to correct it, it's gonna be very painful, because especially in that industry, in textiles, like manufacturing, complex clothing, like not simple stuff, especially in that industry, the learning curve is quite high. Like a tailoring, back before everything was kind of outsourced overseas, and we cared more about our clothing, and we cared more about quality of our clothing. And men wore like suits and women wore pretty dresses that were very ornate and whatnot. Back in those days, you apprenticed before becoming a seamstress, and then a master seamstress, or a tailor and then a master tailor. There was a journeyman program associated with that. And it was like 12 to 15 years before you could become like a master seamstress or a master tailor. One of Canada's oldest menswear manufacturing organizations that still made stuff in Canada, and I don't know if they still do or not. It's called Samuelson in Montreal. And they manufactured fantastic clothing. And all of the people, the master tailors who worked in their organization, and these guys did a fairly good job at their learning and development, and kind of like bringing in people and doing the apprentice and whatever. Because the industry itself didn't really have a lot of support for that, they just did their own, and it worked really well for them. But I think cost pressures ultimately would be something you'd be worried about in a business like that. But like replacing people like that, it's a skilled trade. We just don't think it is, because we buy cheap and cheerful stuff from overseas.
Yep, absolutely. But yeah, you make a really good point. It's that legacy knowledge or skill set that is irreplaceable, that I think a lot of companies overlook. Um, let's pivot a little bit into Roast the Post itself. How has your background, your career, shaped the way you read job postings and explore or examine hiring processes?
Yeah, because on the show, I tend to kind of go off on tangents a little bit and talk about what I think. We both do, right? I tend to talk a lot about organizations, and what I think the structure of an organization is, and what they're trying to accomplish, and whether or not the job ad that we're roasting on that given episode, whether or not I think that that's going to further their goal, or if it's just a little bit out to lunch. That directly relates to my experience and passion for organizational design. Like ever since I became interested in the intersection of how you structure a company with organizational design, systems thinking, systems theory, that type of stuff. It's not something that I can just turn off. It's like, oh, you know what? This is the part to the machine that they're trying to put in place. Yeah, it's the right part. That'll work really well. Or, oh, no, that's totally the wrong part. This is going to end horribly. Here's why. So that part of my career has really like kind of fueled my style, if you will, on the show. And if people at home, like, if you hate it, I'm sorry, I can't turn it off. It's like telling me not to drink water after it's been 41 degrees outside and I've been steam cleaning my carpet like I did yesterday. Little tangent. Never, ever, ever steam clean your carpet when it is humid. It'll take 2 days to dry. I
Yeah.
still have furniture outside of my living room from like 2 days ago.
Um, Roast the Post. It really is about more than just job ads, the good, the bad, and the ugly of what comes with that. So, in your mind, what primary organizational problem are we actually talking about?
Yeah, I think that what we're really trying to do is put the right. I think that what we're trying to do is draw the line between how something can fail inside an organization and where it all began. Because what's very clear to me, and we talk about this here and there on the show, what's very clear to me is that if you structurally set people up to fail through setting the wrong expectations, or through marketing your opportunity to just someone who's not going to be a good fit or the wrong like crowd or whatever else, um, it is inevitable nearly always that it's going to fail. And anytime I think about a company that has high turnover, the natural question is why? Where did that begin? And almost always you can trace that line back to hiring practices, hiring processes, job ads, employer branding, getting the right people in the right role just didn't work in an organization that has high turnover. So I think that we're trying to connect the dots between that and prevent that. And I think that in an age where technology is, can't believe I'm saying this, but accelerating even more things, even faster than it had been 5 years ago, we're starting to lose sight inside organizations of all of these facets that can't be identified by clicking buttons inside a dashboard, inside an ATS or an AI-driven like pipeline management system for hiring. I think that we're losing sight of the importance of the things that sit in the middle. And I don't think that we're properly applying critical thinking skills and situational awareness skills to the hiring process and to the organizational design process. So what I hope we're doing is correcting for some of that. Because if like organizations that are just an absolute nightmare become the norm, it's not going to be great for society, right?
Yeah, I agree. And I think sometimes one might think, oh, well, the job posting doesn't really have much to do with anything. Like that's so far back in the process. And I would argue it has everything to do with
It's the
everything.
most important part.
I think so too. I think so too. If every founder or CEO could understand one thing about hiring before making their next hire, what would it be? I think you touched on that in the previous question.
Hire for skills and capability, not for resume, I think would be my answer. One thing that drives me a little bit nuts about hiring processes, how we do things, and about the labor market and about how we advertise jobs is the whole, you must have this many years of experience in X. Or, and my favorite is, it is required that you have proficiency in Microsoft Office Suite. That stuff drives me a little bit nuts. And that kind of ties back to this thinking about organizational design, where the organization is a machine or an engine and people are just immovable parts that don't change, that have specifications that you plug into that machine or that engine. It's not true. People are malleable. People have the capacity to learn. There's very little outside of highly specialized fields that a person can't learn if they have the right soft skills and if they have the intelligence and ambition and drive to do so. So I would want CEOs and hiring teams and leadership teams to think more about how they can look for balls of clay instead of finished like parts, and how they can have the systems in place to help those balls of clay adopt the shape that is needed for a given position at a given time, and then also how to reform them when those requirements change or when there's an internal opportunity that a person wants to transition into. Because again, like the longer tenure your workforce is inside your organization, the more capable you're going to be when it comes to competing in the market versus other companies that have similar characteristics. So you want to hang on to those people. You want to develop them, not because it's the right thing to do, it is, but because it will make you more profitable. And that's the name of the game, at least as far as it goes right now. Like capitalism's maybe a little bit late stage. So in 20 years, we could be talking about something completely different. But the point of a company right now is to generate profit. Hold on to your people. You'll generate more profit. Not rocket science.
I think a lot of it is companies, it's just go, 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 go. And
Mm-hmm.
they always want someone who can hit the ground running, right? We need someone who can hit the ground running. We don't have to like train them. We don't have to anything. They can just go in and start doing it. And
And they better be scrappy.
yeah, and you better be scrappy about it. And there is some value to that, sure, short term. Like all of these things that we're seeing when they require certain things, it's just such a short term focus. And CEOs like to talk about being so strategic and having vision and everything. But when it comes to bringing people into their organization, their vision is so myopic. It is unbelievable. So I absolutely agree. I would love to see a job posting that doesn't even say what the job is, right? It's like, we are hiring a role for this company. Here's what we do. Here's our mission. Here's our values. The type of people who will succeed are people who are, emotionally intelligent and practice critical thinking and blah, blah, blah. Don't care what you did before. Let's have a conversation and see what
Yeah.
you can do at our company. Like that would be amazing. Again, who has the bandwidth and the resources to do all of that? I don't know. But if I were starting a company from scratch, that would be interesting.
It's really interesting because I have a client right now that's in the heavy construction industry. And there's a wicked labor shortage in that industry in North America, really, like Canada and Mexico. Like there's a wicked labor shortage. And construction firms are actually being held back because of a shortage of labor, both specialized, but also general labor, like low barrier to entry stuff, other than you must be able-bodied and able to, kind of lift a certain amount of weight or whatever. There's a labor shortage in that part of the labor market, which is absolutely wild. So you're seeing construction companies start to think like this and be like, okay, if we bring people into our organization, how do we retain them? How do we train them? How do we retrain them for different things? Like it's very common now to see pathways where smaller construction firms that are specialized will be like, all right, we're going to establish a pathway to grow you from being a general labor to being a specialized equipment operator to being a specialized something else that is licensed, and will like have those internal training pathways. A lot of the times in partnership with associations, which I think is good, but that's a thing. It's one of the few industries I would say in Canada that actively does this, and it's because of necessity.
Still going on this topic because I was just thinking about, I mean, we did an episode about this specifically, but a role that we're hiring for at the company that I work at currently. And truly, the person we've hired is outstanding. She's outstanding because she has the capacity to and the capability to learn quickly, to have good judgment, critical thinking, emotional, and all of these things. But like none of them really had anything to do with her resume because a lot
Mm-hmm.
of resumes for the people applying for the role were very, very similar. And so again, it goes back to that kind of like clay thing of, well, this was about this person's disposition and really not much because a lot of the work that she's doing now, if you think about it, has nothing much to do with her previous job, right? Like it was a different industry, different whatever. It was the characteristics of that individual that
Yeah.
made her outstanding, really.
Yep.
So I'm just really kind of like, I'm kind of going down a path right now, and you're sparking some thoughts for me of what could be a really cool experiment article.
Yeah, I once, long time ago, I interviewed for a job that was, it was like a marketing and lead generation. Marketing is kind of a demand generation job, really, in marketing for a B2B company that built software products meant to help aerospace and heavy industry companies manage safety inspections and manage compliance around like maintenance logging and stuff like that. Like think all the stuff that goes into like keeping an airplane running. They had a software platform that was kind of meant for that. They were looking for a demand generation person to work on their marketing group, kind of a small organization, to kind of like take that on and lead it and build it and figure it out. It was like absolutely perfect for me. But ultimately, they hired someone else who had a less impressive resume, but had experience in software, whereas I didn't at the time. That was the only thing that was different about the two of us. And that drives me a little nuts when companies are like, oh, if you don't have experience in our industry, then there's absolutely no way that you could possibly do this job
Yeah.
because we're special. It's not the case at all, right? But the critical thing, the missing gap in the labor market and in how we hire is that there isn't a great way to evaluate people based on their soft skills. There are no really good measures to say this person is like a 5 out of 7 on critical thinking or a 1 out of 2 on situational awareness. There's really no measurement system that's objective and standardized that does that. If I could wave a magic wand and reshape the labor market, how everything works, I would change that. It'd be like, have the measurement systems in place so any company can objectively measure what a person is good at against what they need and say, yeah, come on, come work for us. We don't care that you haven't got like the experience that we would have wanted.
And I don't think that there needs to be any kind of like specific platform or product that does that. I think that that's something that a really good talent team in a company could create on their own, especially using AI, and always, of course, understanding that their the AI has baked in biases and all of those types of things. My argument is so do we as humans, and so that's your opportunity to create something that can at least do better. But yeah, I think that that's something that a company could do on their own. Is what is it that's required to be successful here? Because there are all of these like behavioral and personality tests, and like I've applied for jobs where you have to submit, those questionnaires and everything. But I also like them. I don't believe in them. I think that they're a million times more biased than anything that you could create on your own. I really believe that. And so I don't think it quite does what it is that you were saying would work. But I think that that opportunity is there for companies to create their own in-house one. So off track. I have another question for you. But I think you just answered it. So I will ask it anyway and see if maybe we want to go into it a little bit. What's a piece or part of the hiring process that you think is outdated or just plain wrong?
Yeah, this I think that this ties back to my dislike of technology driven hiring processes. So I fundamentally believe that hiring processes should always be human driven, but they should be aided by technology. You should use technology appropriately to improve your productivity, to make like your processes better, to make things more manageable. Absolutely, you should do that. But a lot of organizations allow the technology of a vendor company to drive their process. That's wrong. That is backwards. That is a certain way to fail. So I think that companies need to recognize that it's people that drive the process and they're aided by technology. And once you start thinking about your hiring processes and about your approach and about your organizational design as a person, humans think, and you start to allow technology to assist only to make your thinking better and more productive and more efficient and faster, whatever else, then companies will start to be in a better place when it comes to their workforce. I think that like a lot of places just have it backwards.
My company recently was doing an AI training, and somebody brought up the fact that they were really concerned about what AI means for recruitment, and like I mentioned previously, the biases that come with it. But I'm like, but who do you think trained the AI to have those biases, right? Like it is about bringing that process back to a more human place. So I absolutely agree with you. Has hosting Roast the Post changed the way you think about organizations, leadership, or building teams?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that what I've realized through hosting the show with you and analyzing all of these job ads and talking to folks when we bring guests on the show, I think that what I've realized is that the really ass backwards, screwed up el fucko shit that I've run into in my career is not like the exception. It's the norm. Like there's a
Okay.
lot of weird, screwed up stuff out there. It's normal. And that oddly, I found kind of comforting.
Tell me more about that.
Well, it's like, you know, you if you keep on running into these things that are just like backwards and wrong and bad stuff that you don't like, that like turns your hair gray and makes you like pull your ears off your head or whatever, um, you at some point start to wonder if it's you. You're like, what am I doing that like magnets all of this weird stuff towards me? What's going on? Knowing that it's not just you means that you're not really a magnet. You're just swimming in it. So you can start to think, all right, well, now that I know that I'm swimming in it, how do I adapt to keep myself sane and to maybe swim into like a place in this lake of poop that has less poop, or, you know, more like palatable poop. I don't know. So it's kind of how I found it comforting.
More palatable poop. Never heard that sentence uttered before.
Talk to a farmer.
Yeah. I get it. I totally get it. So what has been your favorite Roast the Post episode so far, and what made it memorable for you?
I think that my favorite episode so far is the one that we recorded, where they were looking for, a small startup was looking for like a VIP gaming host for their platform. The Whale Who Loved Me. It's like episode 19 or episode 20 or something like that. Absolutely my favorite, because as we were recording that episode, in my mind the entire time, I was just playing like a James Bond movie, because I imagined this person like coming out of a casino in Macau and getting hired by this company. And they were like very mysterious and well put together and knew all of like the big influential people with tons of money. Like I was basically writing a movie script in my brain when we were filming that episode. I loved it.
That's so funny. I love the name of that episode. That's probably my favorite name of any episode that we have. It's so hilarious. Well, I also feel very happy that that's a job ad that I found. So that makes me
It was
smile.
great. It was great.
And so the last question I have for you is 10 years from now, because we will definitely still have this podcast 10 years from now. What do you hope people say Roast the Post changed?
Mm. If in 10 years someone walked up to me on the street and said, hey, I listened to your podcast, and you guys got me to realize that I need to work to preserve the humanity in the things that are in front of me, and not to build processes that restrict people's ability to be human. If someone said that to me, I'd be super happy. Like I could just be hit by a bus at that point. I'd be good. Be like, yep, I have done what I needed to do on this earth. So yeah, it's great.
Love it. Thank you so much, Paul, for letting myself and the listeners get to know you a little bit better. I really enjoyed it. I loved this conversation.
Me too. We will, I guess, see everybody for a fresh episode next week.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Roast the Post. If this episode made you feel feisty, leave a rating or review wherever you watched or listened. It turns the algorithm into our butler and helps new listeners find the show. We record new episodes every week in our live studio audience. Check the link in the show notes for more.